1619 Project is brazen deception in the service of statism. I agree, but I'm going to take it a step further. Not only is it statism, it's Marxism. It's the way to look at everyone behind the 1619 Project. Even historians say that the 1619 Project is bullcrap and not based on real history. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. Y'all know I love covering the 1619 project. But before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button, share this out so we can get this information out there. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and hit that alarm bell so you know when I'm putting out new stuff. Also, check out my link tree in the description. It has a link to my Patreon. That's where I talk about things that I can't talk about here. There's also a link to my Instagram and my X account, so follow me there as well. All right, so let's get into this news. Now, this comes from the Daily Economy, and they report that it is useful to have frequent reminders that people often resort to deception to peddle their beliefs. The book, The 1619 Project Myth by Philip W. Magnus, is highly valuable in that regard, as it devastates the historical accuracy of the 1619 Project published by the New York Times. That long magazine piece was the brainchild of one of its writers, Nicole Hannah Jones, who used it to make her breathtaking claim that the true date of America's founding was not 1776, but rather 1619, the year when the first slaves were landed in North America. Again, we were still a British colony then. What is she talking about? How do you? This is all used to push their agenda. Why say that? The answer is that, like so many progressives, Nicole Hannah Jones wants to undermine the idea that the United States was founded to increase the people's freedom and replace it with the notion that the nation founding was rooted in slavery and oppression. The American Revolution was fought, in her telling, to preserve slavery, false, which the colonists feared was going to be ended by the British government, which is all false. I mean, we were already moving towards abolishing slavery. The fight was really about states' rights. Everyone knows that. Moreover, she and several of her co-authors maintain the effect of slavery are still with us. Never mind that towards the end of slavery, half of the slave owners were Black and Indian. They don't talk about that. And they don't talk about the last people that actually owned slaves were Indians owning slaves. They don't talk about none of these things. What better way to get people to think of America as a terrible nation that's in need of radical or revolutionary transformation? Almost immediately after its publication, the 1619 Project came under fire from scholars, and not just those on the political right, who found its claims to be unsupported, implausible, and misleading. Among the first was economic historian Philip W. Magnus, now a senior fellow at the Independent Institute. He wrote several critical essays about different aspects of the project, which he compiled into a book in 2020. Now, with more time to reflect on the issues and respond to recent spinoffs from the project, he has put out a new version. It's a demolition job of the first magnitude. Magnus writes, quote, "Each new permutation of Hannah Jones' work has veered more heavily into political advocacy, taking greater liberties with evidence in the process. But faced with the mountain of counter-argument, the New York Times has only made one carefully hidden concession about the doubtful claims in it. While Hannah Jones and her major contributing author, Professor Matthew Desmond, avoid serious confrontations with those who criticize their work and resort to ad hominem attacks." Isn't that par for the course for the left? When you can't argue facts, you go with ad hominem attacks. That's what they're known for. They attack their character and so forth. But the book is more than a point-by-point refutation of the claims in the project. In it, readers also learn a lot about the history of capitalism in America that they probably would not find anywhere else. Here's just an example. While Hannah Jones and her collaborators want to make people believe that slavery and capitalism were somehow in league in early America, that's the opposite of the truth. Magnus recounts the story of the Tappan brothers of New York City. They were successful merchants who opposed slavery. In 1834, they invited Reverend Samuel Cornish, a Black American and abolitionist, to their Sunday worship service. That led to a mob attack on their business and homes, as pro-slavery New Yorkers called their gesture of solidarity an invitation to a slave revolt. Now, this is in New York. This is North. Between mob violence and a boycott against them, the Tappans were nearly ruined. But just when all seemed lost, Lewis Tappan came up with a brilliant plan to revive his business by offering a deal on credit with trusted associates in the abolitionist movement. The result was the New York Mercantile Agency, the forerunner of Dun and Bradstreet. Capitalism and slavery were friends. Nothing could be further from the truth. Of course, they would omit that in the 1619 Project, right? Or consider the thesis advanced by Professor Desmond that the American economy was extremely dependent on cotton produced by slavery, so dependent that it was really the driving force behind the nation's early growth. Magnus demonstrates that his claim is not remotely supported by the evidence, then turns the tables by informing the readers that one of the foremost advocates of slavery in antebellum America was one George Fitzhugh. I'm not familiar who that is, who ranted against the idea of Adam Smith and other free market advocates. Fitzhugh declared that the South, quote, must throw Adam Smith, save Ricardo and company, in the fire. In short, the philosophy of capitalism was utterly incompatible with slavery, and the pro-slavery crowd knew it. Of course, you will hear none of that from Hannah Jones or her supporters, because capitalism is about money. It's about producing a service or product and profiting from that. That's what capitalism is. And so capitalism doesn't care about race. If you got the funds, capitalism would oblige. So this is how it has nothing to do with slavery. Another revealing spinoff from the 1619 Project is how it affected the American Historical Association, or AHA. The president of the AHA, James Sweet, had the temerity to cast doubt on the truthfulness of the claims in a tweet, writing, quote, "As journalism, it is powerful and effective, but it is history." Sweet quickly learned that one is not permitted to ask questions about something so important to the left at this. Magnus writes, quote, "Incensed at even the mildest suggestion that politicization was undermining the integrity of historical scholarship, the activist wing of the history profession showed up at the AHA's thread and began demanding Sweet's cancellation." Of course, isn't that par for the course for the left? They always want to cancel. Instead of having honest debate or honest conversation, they rather stop you from adding to the conversation. So great was the uproar that Sweet felt the need to issue a groveling apology. Why do you apologize to them? Why? For having, quote, caused harm with his tweet. The activists did not bother to engage with Sweet and defend the 1619 Project. They just wanted to see him punished for his apostasy. If there was ever the slightest doubt as the political purpose of the 1619 Project, it was erased when Hannah Jones, in the subsequent Hulu TV series, which I definitely did not watch, based upon it, called for the nation to pay reparations for slavery. That idea has long been dismissed by scholars of all races as unjust and economically ruinous. Nevertheless, she blatantly stated that reparations were needed to atone for our racist past and to explain how we could pay for the trillions it would cost. Told viewers that the government can afford anything it wants just by printing enough money. No, that's how you get inflation. These people don't know anything about anything, but they call themselves scholars, right? How do we know that? Because a few crank economists who subscribe to modern monetary theory say so. Thus, the 1619 Project combines false history with ludicrous economics to promote the statist agenda. Again, they say statist, I say Marxist. It shouldn't surprise anyone to learn that the American education establishment has been eager to embrace the 1619 Project and brings its material into school and college classrooms, which should be banned outright because it's not based on any facts. The leftists who say that the project is just about teaching students some neglected aspects of American history are simply lying. The materials in it are deceptive rather than informative. And I actually covered that before in the previous video, some of the things that they were teaching kids. But Magnus' book will be of use to parents or officials who don't want students to be indoctrinated with the propaganda meant to sow hatred for the country and mislead students about capitalism. The next time you hear anything positive about the 1619 Project, reach for Magnus's excellent book. And that's a recommended read for me. I suggest y'all get this book and read it for yourself. Powerful, powerful book, very informative, and give you a way, like they said, to battle the nonsense that's in the 1619 Project. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this. Leave y'all comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe, and check out jjthepsychotherapist.com for the latest in news. Until next time, peace.